This channel is made possible by viewers like you. My viewers, subscribers, and patrons greatly help to keep this channel going. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any uploads. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, please check out my Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you'll get access to what I'm working on, previews of upcoming content, and even early videos, along with other tier options for those that are interested. Thank you, and now on to the video. The original PlayStation is full of great games that helped to cement Sony as a key player in the games industry. Many franchises were born here, and one such series was Medal of Honor. This World War II based set of first-person shooters was committed to providing an intense experience with elements of realism. Sound and presentation were two areas that were hard to beat in a Medal of Honor game. Over the years, we saw many great titles from the original two PlayStation releases, Allied Assault, Frontline, Rising Sun, among many others. Medal of Honor brought many memorable situations like being a spy behind enemy lines, fighting for the French resistance, storming the beaches of Normandy, and surviving the attack on Pearl Harbor. Besides a mediocre VR release, Medal of Honor has largely turned into a dormant series that EA should bring back. Many of the titles hold up really well and still play great, including some of the very first games. This series is begging to have some form of remastered collection sets. Today I want to remember the making of the two PlayStation 1 games that started it all. Led by filmmaker Steven Spielberg, DreamWorks Interactive was a game company that worked on many big properties like Jurassic Park and Goosebumps. Throughout the 90s, this studio had not experienced many financial successes. They were in need of a commercial hit. At home, Spielberg had been fascinated by a first-person shooter that his son was playing. This game was the revolutionary GoldenEye. This game was a huge hit for the N64, and pushed what movie-based games were capable of, along with innovating in the first-person shooter space through its design. At the same time, Spielberg was deep into production of his World War II epic Saving Private Ryan. It is here where he got the idea to marry the World War II setting with the gameplay of a first-person shooter. Spielberg wanted to provide an educational avenue to teach players about the war, while modeling it into an entertaining video game, and the early stages of Medal of Honor began to take shape. Saving Private Ryan would be too violent and graphic for children, but Spielberg felt that a video game could be a way to convey the weight of the war that would be more appropriate for both children and adult players. With World War II having a vast amount of locations that featured much of the fighting, this particular game would be focused on the European theater, and it would take on the name of America's highest military award. The developers aimed to respect the soldiers who fought in those battles, while also showing historical lessons interwoven with the entertaining gameplay. Spielberg and his team brought this concept to upper management, but they were sadly not sold on the idea. Management felt that World War II would not be a profitable setting, and that something more sci-fi would be a better route to go in. So even without their management's buy-in, the developers got together to build a prototype to show that not only this concept could work, but it could be really fun. This prototype sold the project, and Medal of Honor was approved for development. At the time, Sony's PlayStation did not have many first-person shooters, and the developers wanted to create one for those players on that platform that wanted a great shooter. Medal of Honor would incorporate a high level of authenticity to the action. The weapons both needed to look like their real-world counterparts, along with sounding as powerful as they were in real life. Players would have an arsenal of both Allied and Axis weapons. Medal of Honor would put the player into the role of Lieutenant Jimmy Patterson as he completes missions for the OSS. While there would be constant shooting, the objectives would range from going undercover as a spy to sabotage the enemy's war effort, along with recovering stolen artwork. To maintain this level of realism, the developers spent a lot of time on the AI. The team wanted the AI to surprise the player each time they entered a new room. If the player threw a grenade at the AI would go for the grenade to throw it back at the player, or even kick it. Depending on where the enemy is shot, the AI would react appropriately. Like I said, realism was very important to the developers, and as such they looked to military consultants to correct any inaccuracies the game had, while being an effective means to ensure authenticity. Old war footage would be used to convey the story, to show the players something real from the actual events that occurred. Sadly, towards the end of the project, Medal of Honor was faced with an impossible situation. The events of the Columbine shooting negatively affected the image of first-person shooters. At the time, Medal of Honor featured a large amount of violence with blood and even dismemberment, so the team needed to make the hard decision. They could keep the graphic violence in the game, but at the potential cost that Medal of Honor will get needless negative attention, or they remove the blood and dismemberment to hopefully avoid any connection with the shooting. DreamWorks went with the second option, but this wasn't the only outside challenge the team would face. The studio received a letter from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society's president, stating that this Medal of Honor game was dishonoring the award and wanted the name of the project changed. Spielberg and the team had no intention of changing the name, and as a means to show the Society's president that this project was a means to show respect for the soldiers that fought, they invited him to come and see the game firsthand. Following the meeting, the Congressional Medal of Honor Society's president no longer wanted the name of the game changed and endorsed the project publicly. The development of Medal of Honor is a story about a group of talented people who had a strong vision and continually overcame obstacles to see their game completed. In October 1999, Medal of Honor was released to the world, and this would only be the beginning for this very young series. Medal of Honor was a great success from the reception of the critics and especially the fans, along with its sales. DreamWorks Interactive was in need of a win, and this was it. But something interesting happened prior to the launch of Medal of Honor. Prior to this game, they had a few releases that failed to make money, which put the entire development studio into a tough situation. Medal of Honor was looking to be a hit, but nothing was certain, and before it was even released, a deal was struck between DreamWorks Interactive and Electronic Arts. Now EA had a very successful title from these developers, and there was a lot of potential to turn this into a series, and thus work began on more than one sequel. EA was interested in Medal of Honor making its way to the PC. First-person shooters were popular there, and it seemed like the perfect place for Medal of Honor to continue to grow. Different studios petitioned ideas to acquire the chance at the first Medal of Honor title on the PC. The studio who got the job is actually the one who would later go on to make Call of Duty. This PC Medal of Honor would be an original game, not a port of the PS1 title, and would be known as Allied Assault. Another team would be exploring Medal of Honor through the eyes of air combat. Now this was late into the run of the PlayStation, with the PS2 right around the corner. The bulk of the original development team that worked on the original Medal of Honor began work on what would later be known as Medal of Honor Frontline. This would see the player assuming the role again as Jimmy Patterson, along with impressive set pieces like storming the beaches of Normandy and completing special operations. But a small group of the original team was given the green light to make a direct sequel for the PS1. Medal of Honor was slowly turning into a giant with all of these games now in development. But this smaller team was interested in telling a story about the French Resistance, starring a character that you interacted with from the first game. This character was based on an actual female resistance fighter, and oddly enough, this team needed to prove themselves to management again. Management was concerned that a female lead might potentially hurt the sales of the project, so the studio used the Tomb Raider franchise as their basis for how a female heroine could be done, and could be done very well. Tomb Raider was hugely successful on the PlayStation. As a result, management backed off and the development team was able to continue with their vision intact. The authenticity that made the first so special was retained for Underground, and interviews were conducted with people who fought in the French Resistance. The narrative would feature a more emotional hook, as the player would be a French citizen fighting to push back the enemy within their own country. Underground wasn't going to be a full 2.0 version of Medal of Honor, but rather a sequel that took what made the first great, and then added to it. Plus, this was the opportunity for the developers to use cut content from the first, and polish it for this game. For example, a castle level was going to be a memorable sequence, but was then cut, and then completed, and then repurposed in Underground. In October 2000, Medal of Honor Underground was released to the world. Underground was praised for its quality, but to this day it does remain one of the more underrated, or overlooked titles for the series. Part of this is due to the game releasing the same year as the PS2, and that probably played a role in taking attention away from new PS1 games releasing at that time. Nevertheless, Underground is a great sequel, and showed how just a fraction of the original team could still make a quality game. Medal of Honor may look older and have some stiffness to the original controls, but both of these titles are still a joy to play to this day. The aim button allows you to freely aim. While you cannot move while using it, it's a great way to be more precise with your shots, along with providing tactical advantages like being able to peek around cover. The sound and impact of the shooting is simply impressive. Each of the weapons sound deadly and like there's some actual weight behind each of your shots. These titles do feature teen-rated violence, and even so, the intensity of the firefights is not compromised. Enemies will react depending on where you hit them, with even being able to pop off their helmet along with causing them to dance on one foot. To go along with this, the AI is impressive, with them even kicking back thrown grenades. Much of this stuff surprised me when returning back to this, because many of these details are things we don't even see in modern shooters. All of this combined with most of the action being at close range means that you will be engaging in rewarding and intimate action sequences. One of my favorite aspects with many of the early Medal of Honor titles are how they have this undercover spy-like element to it. You might be participating in a bigger battle or fighting alongside other soldiers, but then your mission will have you veer off to contribute to the war effort in a more cloak and dagger way. As a result, I love the missions where in both games you are completely undercover with needing to show your papers or keeping up appearances as a photographer, while also sabotaging the enemy's operations. There's a satisfying element of stealth as you hide in plain sight, and a freedom in those levels too, because if you get caught you can still engage in open firefights, so having player choice enhances the experience. Mission briefings give you a dump of information about your next mission, and while the narrative and story might be different than how stuff is done now, we would normally expect character development and character interactions. The story in the early Medal of Honor games was actually focused more on the plot, but this doesn't mean the narrative scenes are bad. I thoroughly love them. You have the perfect narration providing you with that sense of urgency that is needed for each mission introduction, along with using a mix of stills and war footage to hammer home the reality of everything you are participating in.
Good morning, Lieutenant. I'm Colonel Hargrove from the Office of Strategic Services. I'll get right to the point. The OSS was formed 2 years ago by presidential order to serve as the intelligence branch of the United States military. Our mission is anything and everything. Espionage, sabotage, subversion, search and rescue, you name it, we do it. Now, from time to time, we recruit people from outside of the regular ranks, especially if they've got a particular skill we need. Like you, Lieutenant Patterson. What you did last Monday got our attention. I know you consider yourself just another anonymous pilot in the Transport Corps, but taking out a half a dozen of the Wehrmacht and then sneaking back into friendly territory is quite an impressive feat of soldiering by anyone's measure.
Both games feature a great sense of atmosphere. At times it almost feels like a horror title, with the lighting and sound that you hear, especially at night. If Medal of Honor is a masterpiece, then Underground is an underrated masterpiece. You can look at this as being more of the same, but when your first title was that great, more of the same is not a bad thing. Plus you get to experience all of that great shooting in a new setting. There's even some appreciated control options to enhance how you play it, along with AI deploying more cover-based mechanics. And there's impressive set pieces exclusive to Underground, with you meeting up with an ally and then it turning into an enemy ambush, or fighting through a level with two factions who are fighting each other and you're caught in the middle. Both games have a commitment to authenticity. You feel and see the weight of your actions, along with having that power fantasy you would want from a game, and mixing that in with being a special agent contributing to the war effort. Medal of Honor and Underground delivered exceptionally well on what they set out to do. There's a respect here where it honors those who fought in those conflicts, and does not make light of the material, while also still managing to deliver an extremely entertaining experience. If it was one thing that I found that was common between the development of both games, is that if you think you have a winning idea, you have to find a way to fight for it. These titles have aged like fine wine, and Michael Giacchino ensures that you'll be humming the theme even after you're done playing it. Have you played the PS1 Medal of Honor games? If so, what are your thoughts on them? Let me know in the comments below. If you're interested in being notified of new videos, please hit the subscribe button and bell. And if you would like to support the channel and get early access to content, please check out my Patreon. All of the links will be at the end of this video and within the description. And thank you very much for watching.